Yeah, it's relevant because, we live in an era where there's this notion of affirmative action and black economic empowerment that is meant to, if I can call it this way, unscramble the egg. In other words, we have this unbelievable history of mixed fortunes, and somehow affirmative action is meant to place us all in the position that we would have been in but for the discrimination and the colonialism of the past. So it is this unbelievably uh, arrogant notion that we can look into some backward looking crystal ball and say, we know what the world would have looked like, hypothetically, if everybody was fair and decent from the start. And the problem is we don't. It is absolutely impossible. And one example of that is then to say, when the colonialists arrived in the Cape, they were already miles ahead in the race, if you may call it that, the race of privilege, technology, medical advances, property, scientific development, education, and economic skill. So in those respects, the people who arrived in the Cape were already way ahead in the race. Now, let's suppose at that point in time, they had said, well, we are going to make everybody live in a liberal society, which would have meant that the local people would have gone to the same schools, they would have had the same opportunities, and so on. Now, the question that you have is, what about all that privilege that went before, which was nothing to do with discrimination? People just happened to be lucky. It's a sheer stroke of luck that they grew up in Europe, where there was agriculture, where the rivers were navigable, and so on and so on. With the result that those people who arrived in the Cape were not going to sit around and wait for the rest to catch up. It's exactly the same thing that's still happening today. When you look at 1994, what happened to the white privileged economic grouping? They carried on working. In fact, there you sit, an entrepreneur trying to make something of your world, and I would believe quite successfully so. And there are hundreds and thousands of people in that book. In fact, the best thing that ever happened to white people in this country was being let loose from the tethers and the apron strings of apartheid, because now they were on their own and they had to make do. Now, going back to 1952, people would have carried on. How do you account for that? If you want to unscramble that egg, how do you go back and say, well, I must account for the fact that people are ahead? Thomas Sowell, who's one of the great economists of the 20th and 21st century, has made numerous analyses of how people derive their privilege and their relative position, and how different people are. And he makes this interesting point. He says, even twins in the same house don't have equal outcomes. How on earth do we expect different groupings like races with absolutely different backgrounds to have the same outcomes? So equal outcomes and even equal opportunities are pipe dreams. They cannot work. So the simple point is, you cannot unscramble the egg, and that's very important. It's not a minor matter, because if you can't unscramble the egg, it may well be that the best way is to follow the principle of Pythagoras in saying, first do no harm. Just let it be, because it will develop as it should. You can't unscramble the egg, and you can't make people be in the position that they would have been in that nirvana, that utopia of a supposed fair society. It's impossible.
So if you also apply that in the current land debate, you can also say, let's say we give the black land first and EFF everything. And in the hypothetical, we say white people stole all the land. Even if you admit that, it still doesn't account for example, the cultivation techniques, the technology, everything that came with the Europeans. You have to account for that as well. Like you said, the white privilege that came with the Europeans.
Yes, you have to, and also there is so little really that depends. It's this notion that land is the be all and end all of wealth differences is an absolute myth. There's
Hmm.
simply no truth in that. The real capital, if you like, is human capital, and that's what is between your ears. Unfortunately, that takes development, and everybody should get the best possible opportunity that they can get to develop that capital between their ears. But uh, land, the development of land is just one minor resource in the bigger scheme of things.
Hmm.
It's not land that makes people rich, not land per se.
Hmm.
It may be one way, but and I think that if you try, as you say, try and unscramble that egg, how do you account for the centuries of technology that goes into agriculture and so
Hmm.
on? So it's a very frustrating exercise.